So let's get some political, economic, and business perspectives on this election. As we turn to Agnes Gitau, who is the managing partner at GBS Africa, based in London. Good evening, Agnes. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, Boston, and thank you for having me again.
Thank you very much. It's good to have you on the show. I'm sure this is one election in East Africa. You also come from East Africa. So what is the political environment in Uganda as the polls are conducted today?
So conversations we've had with our partners in Uganda has been largely peaceful. They started a little bit late in some places out of the city, but largely peaceful. And I guess people have been, due to the events that have been happening in the last sort of couple of days, I guess a lot of people were off the streets, went and conducted the electoral process peacefully, as you normally see it across the African continent. The process itself is peaceful. It's what happens after the election is conducted. What happens when an election is disputed? That's when you're likely to see violence and skirmishes. But at the moment, thankfully, largely peaceful, with no reports of any violence at all. So I think it's a good thing.
Was that surprising to you, Agnes? Considering the whole political fever that, well, before the elections, before they went to the polls today?
I guess fear and propaganda is what the incumbent used, thereby making sure people just remain calm, really. And there was a very stern message by the incumbent Museveni on Tuesday, where he said, if you disturb peace, you'll have yourself to blame. So I guess Ugandans heeded to the message, went to polls peacefully, and not surprisingly, because Uganda largely is a peaceful country, but it's when people are agitated, when people are forced or left with no alternative at all, it's when you see chaos. But at the moment, they conducted themselves with peace and dignity.
So do you think all the fears initially, one of the opposition figures, Bobi Wine, has been harassed and all of that in the days and weeks before the elections and all that? So do you think the President Museveni's administration this time was able to make sure that everyone behaved themselves? Like you said, this is a largely peaceful country on its own.
Look, today's event, that the election process, the polling took place peacefully, really we shouldn't forget of what has happened prior to today. We've seen the Bobi Wine, the key opposition figure who is contesting against Museveni, harassed, his supporters harassed, not given an opportunity to conduct his election campaign, internet shut down throughout the country from yesterday. So today's process, it's the people of Uganda. It's nothing to do with the incumbent. We have seen military and police everywhere in the streets. So the process of voting usually is peaceful. The people who agitated, and this is not courtesy of the incumbent, it's because the people of Uganda really want a peaceful process, and that's why they conducted themselves, trying whatever it takes to avoid skirmishes and violence.
What are we hearing, what are you hearing about the electoral process itself and the institution in charge of a free and fair election?
It's Africa, Boston. It's an African election where the incumbent has the power of the office. Institutions, unfortunately, and that's been one of the biggest challenges for our countries, is lack of strong and independent institutions. So as I said, the question now comes to the institution, the Electoral Commission. Remember, observers have been denied access to polling stations. Remember, the US yesterday pulled out very last minute from observing these elections. The EU observers were also denied visas. And there are also news about journalists or any observers who've been denied entry into Uganda. So is the process fair, free and fair? We wait and see. We wait and see whether it will be 100% turnout for Museveni, 100% vote for Museveni. That will be obviously manufactured by Electoral Commission. But I don't think it's been free and fair. The events that have followed today have been far from free and fair, certainly.
I think from tomorrow morning, when the results begin to come in, we'll begin to get a whole lot of more clearer picture of what actually went down in Uganda today. But how would the new administration, whether it's a continuation of President Museveni for another couple of years or someone else, how would they face these critical issues of poverty, infrastructure, high unemployment, and so on in this East African nation?
Look, Ugandans go to the poor, grappling with a lot of challenges, as you said, higher rates of unemployment, obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, infrastructure deficit. So these are issues that administration, and that's what President Museveni has been saying, that he has been able for the last 3 decades, to provide an a conducive economic environment for Ugandans, and thereby asking for another term, 40 years it will be, another term for him to complete what he has started. But people ask, if for the last 40 years you haven't been able to move, he claims he has, move Ugandans to a good place where they're economically stable, and sort of a middle status economy. If he hasn't been able to achieve that, what will he do in the next 5 years? So yeah, policy issues will be looking at developing Uganda's economy, promoting education and healthcare access. But as you and I know, there are no surprises. I think it will be another 5 term for Museveni. So we are not expecting to see any disruption on his policy on economic development and others.
But do you think those policies will get better, at least, at some point, somehow?
Uganda has been lucky. It's a rich country, and you're aware that the big project, the pipeline project between Uganda and Tanzania, $3.5 billion worth of infrastructure, Uganda discovered oil a couple of years ago. So, and there's been some sort of direction because it's been one administration for 35 years. So investors and people interested in this country already sort of have a clue of what is expected, so there's no uncertainty, which helps in terms of investment. Whether the country will get better, remember, Uganda is closely linked to the external factors. So whatever happens in the global economy, whatever happens in the regional economy will directly impact Uganda. But they have whatever it takes. They have the foundations, but it is whether he can move away from the foundation and start seeing the resources trickling to or translating to better lives for the Ugandans.
But Agnes, how important is Uganda's political stability and the outcome of this election to key trade regional allies like Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, even the DR Congo?
So Uganda, as you say, the geopolitics of East Africa, Uganda is highly, or Museveni, I must say, not Uganda, Museveni and his cronies are very much linked to the regional politics. So DRC, control of DRC and what happens in DRC, Museveni has a hand in it. You remember there's a dispute, border dispute, we spoke about it yesterday, between Rwanda and Uganda. South Sudan, another key ally of Sudan. So he's surrounded because he's been in power for so long. So a lot of East African leaders or tend to look at Museveni, see what Museveni, or get an endorsement from Museveni. So he's a very powerful man in the region. So suddenly, whatever happens in Uganda has an impact on the world, and countries like DRC, Rwanda, South Sudan, the less stable economies around Uganda will be keenly looking at what happens in this. So this is not just for Uganda alone, Boston. This is for the region. We'll see what happens.
This is for the region. East African community will see what happens. Thank you so much, Agnes Gitau, Managing Partner at GBS Africa out of London. Thank you. Have a great evening.